A big hello to everybody watching. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andy and I'm a member of Ballymoney Elim Church. Like the other members of our fellowship, I'd like to share a little of God's goodness. So first of all, let's talk about birth. As people, we're complex beings. There's so many facets that contribute to who we are. Nonetheless, we can talk broadly of the physical and the spiritual, you and me. These are so intertwined that we sometimes forget that they are separate entities. Physically, I was born on the 6th of December 1978. I can already see you doing the maths. I'm resigned to the fact that no one lives forever, and as a result, I'm only here for a relatively short period of time. I have no idea how long that will be, only God knows. But what about the spiritual side? Just as we're born physically alive, spiritually we're dead. We're all born with this problem of sin in our lives, and it's this sin that separates us from God. That means we're spiritually dead, as it is only in God that we find true life. We read in the book of Romans, the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. How then can we become spiritually alive? Well, the Bible shows us that it can only be found by putting our trust in Jesus. His sacrifice makes us right before God. When we put our trust in Him, we have our spiritual birth. Spiritually, I don't know when I was born, and that used to really trouble me. I'd hear people sharing their testimonies in church, and they always seemed to have a date. Invariably, the individual will have followed a colourful existence: drink, drugs, rock and roll, prison, the whole works. Then they would pinpoint the exact day when they saw the light and were born again. Now, I used to go home and think, I haven't got a date, so I better make sure. I'd get down and pray for salvation again, just to make sure I was covered. However, I'd forget to write down the date, and lo and behold, I'd be back to square one again. Something that really helped me look past this was when I started travelling. Many of the people I spent time with in Africa and Asia didn't have a birth certificate. They didn't know when they were born. Did that mean they weren't alive? Of course not. That would be absurd. Similarly, although I couldn't dig out a spiritual birth certificate, I knew that I was alive. I didn't need to make sure anymore. So what about purpose then? It's not enough simply to be born. We need to have a purpose. During teenage years, you're making that transition from childhood to adulthood, and you tend to have big hopes and dreams for the future. You also tend to ask big questions. Rather, you tend to think big questions because you'd never verbalize it. That would be awkward. As a teenager, I used to think about freedom and exploring the world in which we lived. But the question used to surface: what is true freedom? I spent 1 year as an Erasmus student at university in France, one of the most fantastic years of my life. In my dorm room, we used to hold a Bible study group. There were perhaps 10 or so of us. One of the ministers of the local Reformed church used to lead it. I can remember him talking about freedom in a way that made sense for me. He described a train. Should the train think to itself, I feel constricted by these tracks, I'm going to veer off? It would soon end in ruin. A train was designed for a purpose, and it would only find true freedom on the tracks when it was doing what it was created to do. Similarly, we were created by a designer for a purpose. We will only find true freedom when we're living the life we were created for. So what were we created for? I was sent to Drumrea Sunday School, where many wonderful, wonderful people gave up their time to build into our young lives. One of the joys, though I can tell you it didn't feel like it then, was having to learn the catechism. It's amazing how some of it sticks. The first question: what is man's chief end? You could say, what's man's purpose? We would then have to learn the response: man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. That, in a nutshell, is our purpose, to glorify God. And you know what? It's enjoyable. Just as a train's freedom is tied to the tracks, so our freedom is tied to God. He gives us purpose and identity. This is what gives us peace and security regardless of what life may bring. True meaning can be found in nothing or no one else. What about sovereignty then? Well, often life can seem like a mist. We can't see too far ahead, and there are uncertainties that come with that. As a teenager, there always appeared to be many doors in front of me, many possibilities. What direction should I move in? What if I start down the wrong path? When you feel that you're the sole person in charge of your destiny, that puts a lot of pressure on you. I remember feeling disappointed when interviews didn't go my way or things didn't quite work out as I had planned. When I learned to place my future in God's hands, I found that the pressure was removed. He cares for us. He knows us. We only see in part, but God sees the big, big picture. Indeed, He orchestrates it. When I look back, I thank God for closing certain doors. I also thank Him for saving me from myself on many occasions. It's been said that no one has given me more difficulty on this earth than myself. When things don't quite work out as we planned, it's for our own good. I don't know my future, but I know who holds it, and that's good enough for me. So to finish, we think of birth. Spiritually, where are you? Have you been spiritually reborn? It's the only thing that stands the test of time. We read in John 3:16, "For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in Him should not perish but have everlasting life." And then how about purpose? Without it, what's the point in life? It's simply going through the motions. I'm not a mistake. You are not a mistake. We were created by God for a purpose, to bring Him glory. True freedom is tied to Him. And then sovereignty. Does it ever feel that you're isolated and your life is falling apart? Your life is a little bit like a kingdom. A kingdom has a sovereign. My question is, who is on the throne of your life? If it is you, your kingdom will not stand. If it is God, your future is secure. So I urge you, wherever you are, if you have not gotten right with God, do not delay. Get right with Him today. Thanks for listening.